They were called the Black Twins of the Ozarks, feared even among their own kin. Abigail, Nora. And long before their names were whispered with dread, before death followed wherever they went, their story took root in the fog-drenched hills of southern Missouri. The year was 1932. In a forgotten hollow carved into the Boston Mountains, where ancient oak trees knotted their roots deep into stone and mist clung to the land well past sunrise, the Caldwell family lived beyond the reach of maps and memory. This part of Shannon County was a place the modern world never quite claimed. Roads dissolved into dirt paths. News arrived late, if it arrived at all. And secrets, once buried here, stayed buried. The Caldwells were already outsiders before the twins were born. Unlike most families scattered through this stretch of the Ozarks, they were black, descendants of a man named Isaiah Caldwell, a formerly enslaved laborer who fled north into the mountains after the Civil War. He chose isolation deliberately. In the years following emancipation, hostility followed freed families wherever they went. But here, in the hills, the land offered something rare: distance. By the early 20th century, that distance had become a cage. Generations passed with little contact beyond their own bloodline. By 1932, the Caldwell homestead could only be reached by a narrow, winding trail stretching more than 15 miles from the nearest town. The Great Depression pressed in from all sides, tightening its grip. Hunger was constant. Money non-existent. The family survived on thin soil, wild game, and whatever the hills were willing to give. At the center of the family stood Jeremiah Caldwell. He was a hard man, shaped by labor and loss. His hands were permanently scarred from years of fieldwork and hunting. His eyes, distant and sunken, carried the weight of choices made long ago. His wife Sarah had died in childbirth in 1910, leaving him with 5 children and no softness left in him. There were his sons, Isaiah Jr., Elijah, Thomas, and Joseph. And then there was Mary. Mary Caldwell moved differently than the rest. Her right foot was twisted at birth, forcing her into a permanent limp. No doctor in town could explain it. Some said it was a birth defect. Others whispered about bloodlines folding in on themselves. Mary heard the rumors. She always did. She learned early that the world beyond the hills was not kind. When she ventured into town, rarely, people stared. Children mocked her gait. Adults avoided her eyes. Eventually, Mary stopped going altogether. The hollow became her entire world. In the spring of 1931, Mary gave birth to twin girls. No father was named. No questions were allowed. Jeremiah Caldwell made sure of that. The twins were identical, unnervingly so. Pale-skinned, almost white despite their lineage, with long dark hair and eyes the color of amber glass. Their gaze reflected light strangely, like a cat's eyes catching moonlight in the dark. From the moment they entered the world, something felt wrong. Dr. William Harrington, the only physician in eminence willing to treat black patients, was called to the cabin for the delivery. Years later, his medical journals would surface, filled with observations he never shared publicly. Female twins born to M. Caldwell. Identical presentation. Abnormalities present. Both girls had fused fingers on their left hands. Their growth was slow. Their cries weak. Harrington noted the signs carefully, his pen pressing hard into the paper. He suspected the truth immediately. The Caldwell family tree had begun to collapse inward. Isolation had narrowed marriage options to almost nothing. Cousins married cousins. Bloodlines recycled themselves. By the time Mary was born, the damage was already visible. But what Harrington wrote in his private journal, not the official record, was far more disturbing. Physical markers suggest extreme genetic similarity between parents. I fear the father may be a close blood relative. When he pressed for answers, Jeremiah's demeanor changed. The old man became hostile. Protective. Dangerous. Harrington never asked again. As the twins grew, their differences sharpened. They didn't speak until nearly 3 years old. And when they did, it wasn't to anyone else. They spoke only to each other, soft murmurs, half-formed words, sounds that didn't resemble language at all. A private communication, sealed off from the rest of the world. They reacted violently to noise. Thunder sent them screaming. Sunlight made them retreat into shadow. During the day, they stayed inside the cabin, hovering near corners where the light was weakest. At night, they seemed to come alive. By the time Abigail and Nora turned 5, the family began noticing things missing. Chickens. Rabbits. Small animals from traps. Later, their remains would be found arranged near the tree line, bodies opened, organs removed, placed with careful precision. When asked, the twins stared back in perfect silence. Their amber eyes revealed nothing. By 1940, the Caldwells had vanished almost entirely from public view. Jeremiah alone made the trip into town, once every few months, to trade or buy what couldn't be grown or hunted. The girls were hidden. Their education stopped at what Mary could teach from memory. And then, in the winter of 1943, death arrived inside the family. Joseph, the youngest son, was found at the bottom of the well. There were no signs of a struggle. No broken bones. No wounds. Except for his eyes. They had been removed with unsettling precision. No sheriff came. No report was filed. The Caldwells did not trust the law, and the law did not care enough to insist. The twins were 12 years old. They showed no grief. That night, Mary locked her bedroom door for the first time in her life. She slept with a knife beneath her pillow. In her journal, she wrote words she never intended anyone to read. "My girls ain't right. Something in them ain't human. Lord, forgive me for what I brought into this world." But what Mary feared most wasn't what the twins were becoming. It was what they already were. And the secret she had buried since the winter of 1930. The truth Mary carried was older than the twins themselves. It stretched back to the winter of 1930, when the hills were locked in ice and hunger pressed harder than morality ever had. Snow had cut the Caldwells off completely. Traps came up empty. The garden lay frozen and dead. For weeks, the family survived on scraps and boiled roots. It was during those months that something inside the household broke. Thomas Caldwell, Mary's brother, had always lingered too close. His eyes followed her when she moved through the cabin. His voice softened when he spoke to her. In isolation, with no one watching and desperation gnawing at every corner of the mind, long-suppressed impulses finally surfaced. Mary never wrote the details down. She didn't need to. The result was born the following spring. Abigail. Nora. Daughters conceived through blood already thinned by generations of intermarriage, now folded completely in on itself. Brother and sister. Sin layered upon sin. Mary believed the hills would bury it. That silence would be enough. She was wrong. As the twins entered adolescence, the air around them changed. Their presence seemed to weigh on the cabin, pressing down on the walls, draining warmth from the room. They grew tall quickly, far taller than expected, long-limbed and eerily graceful. Their movements mirrored one another so precisely it unsettled anyone who watched for too long. They spoke rarely. And when they did, it was often together, voices overlapping, sentences completed before the first word finished leaving the mouth. By 13, they had stopped reacting to death entirely. That was the age they took Elijah. It happened in November of 1944, on a night so cold the stars burned white in the sky. Elijah's body was discovered the following morning inside the tobacco drying shed. He lay carefully positioned, hands crossed over his chest, eyes wide open, mouth slack as though caught mid-breath. There were no marks. No wounds. No explanation. But Mary had seen something the night before. Through a narrow crack in her bedroom door, she watched her daughters guide Elijah across the yard. One twin on each side. Their hands rested lightly on his arms. He walked with them willingly, his expression vacant, his steps slow and obedient, like a man sleepwalking toward the edge of a cliff. Mary didn't scream. She couldn't move. In her journal, she wrote only one line. God help us. They've taken Elijah. I can't lie to myself anymore. After Elijah's death, something inside the Caldwell family fractured permanently. Jeremiah grew quieter. He sat for hours on the porch, mumbling prayers that trailed off into confusion. Isaiah Jr. stopped sleeping through the night. He kept a loaded shotgun beside his bed, finger resting near the trigger even in his dreams. Mary began wearing a small cloth pouch around her neck, filled with dried herbs, whispered prayers, and fragments of old knowledge passed down from her grandmother. Protection, she hoped. Or penance. The twins noticed everything. They watched their family adapt to fear the way prey adjusts to the presence of a predator, carefully, silently, always alert. By 1947, Thomas vanished. The official explanation was simple. He'd gone hunting and never returned. The woods swallowed men all the time. But Mary knew the truth. She recognized the pattern. Another body claimed without evidence. Another sin erased without burial. By the summer of 1949, only 4 Caldwells remained. Jeremiah, now weak and failing. Isaiah Jr. Mary. And the twins, newly 18. The property decayed around them. Fields grew wild. Fences collapsed. The hollow felt abandoned long before the fire ever came. Despite their isolation, the twins knew things they shouldn't have. Mary once overheard them speaking softly about streets in New York City and names, intersections, neighborhoods described with unsettling precision. When they realized she was listening, they stopped mid-sentence and turned toward her in perfect unison. Their stare drove her back into her room. The most terrifying realization came slowly: the twins felt nothing for her. No attachment. No warmth. No recognition of motherhood. She had brought them into the world, but they had never belonged to it. In July of 1949, Isaiah Jr. made a decision that sealed what little hope remained. He went to Eminence. Dr. William Harrington was closing his clinic when Isaiah arrived, sweat-soaked, trembling, eyes wild with exhaustion. He asked for privacy. What he told Harrington that evening would later become one of the most disturbing testimonies in the case. Isaiah spoke of the girl standing over Jeremiah's bed at night. Hands hovering inches above the old man's chest. Whispering in that same broken, shared language. He described how his father would wake gasping, disoriented, weaker each morning. He told Harrington about the animals. About the way the twins could hold a person's attention until they forgot to move. Forgot to think. They ain't right, Doc, Isaiah said. Something's wrong in their blood. Then he told the truth Mary had hidden for nearly 2 decades. That Thomas was the father. Harrington listened without interrupting. He was a man trained to separate superstition from pathology, but this time, the science terrified him more than the folklore ever could. Extreme inbreeding. Identical abnormalities. Neurological involvement. He agreed to visit the Caldwell property the following weekend. He never made it. 3 days after Isaiah's visit, smoke rose from the hollow. By the time authorities reached the property, the cabin had collapsed into ash. Inside were 3 bodies, burned beyond recognition, later identified as Jeremiah, Isaiah Jr., and Mary. The twins were gone. The fire was ruled an accident. A lantern tipped. A cooking flame left unattended. No investigation followed. In 1949, a black family dying in an isolated hollow did not warrant further attention. Dr. Harrington knew better. And that knowledge would cost him everything. Dr. William Harrington did not believe in coincidences. 3 days after Isaiah Caldwell sat trembling in his office, the Caldwell cabin burned to the ground. The twins vanished. The entire bloodline seemingly erased overnight. Official explanations arrived quickly, neat and hollow. Harrington rejected every one of them. What Isaiah had described lingered in his mind like an untreated wound. So Harrington did what the authorities would not. He began asking questions. Quietly, at first. Letters to physicians in neighboring counties. Conversations held behind closed doors. He asked about unusual deaths. Strange twins. Genetic abnormalities that didn't fit ordinary patterns. The first lead came from Carter County. A black family named Jackson had recently taken in 2 young women who matched the twins' description with unsettling precision. Tall. Identical. Pale-skinned with amber eyes. Locals said they claimed distant family ties, something vague but convincing enough to avoid scrutiny. Shortly after their arrival, the Jacksons' only son fell ill. No fever. No rash. Just weakness. A slow collapse that left him bedridden within weeks. Doctors were baffled. Treatments failed. His eyes clouded over, turning milky white before death claimed him. Then the father followed. Same symptoms. Same progression. Same end. Harrington documented everything. He noted the fused fingers on the twins' left hands, distinctive, rare, unmistakable. He recorded witness descriptions of their movements, their synchronized speech, the way people struggled to recall conversations with them clearly afterward. In his journal, Harrington wrote, "Their physical markers make concealment impossible. Yet they vanish repeatedly. This suggests intentional movement, planning, and an understanding of human behavior far beyond what their upbringing should allow." His final entry regarding the Jacksons was dated November 12, 1949. "I believe I have located A and N near Van Buren. I will travel tomorrow to confirm identities and assess the condition of the remaining family members. If responsible for prior deaths, institutionalization is essential. This may be the most extreme case of genetic deterioration I have ever encountered." Harrington never arrived. His car was found abandoned on a rural road between Eminent and Van Buren. The doors were unlocked. His medical bag lay untouched in the back seat. His wallet was still inside. There were no signs of a struggle. Authorities concluded he had likely been attacked by robbers or animals. No one could explain why nothing was taken. At the Jackson property, life continued, briefly. The twins remained for 3 more weeks. Then they vanished again, leaving behind 2 fresh graves and a community too frightened to ask questions. From there, the trail went cold. For nearly 2 years, Abigail and Nora Caldwell ceased to exist in any official sense. No records. No reports. No sightings that could be verified. Some said they had died in the fire. Others whispered they were never human at all. The truth emerged slowly, decades later. In the late 1990s, historian Dr. Eleanor Whitman began combing through Ozark newspaper archives, church death registries, and personal journals while researching isolated black communities in Missouri and Arkansas. What she found disturbed her deeply. Deaths. Clusters of them. Always following the same pattern. 2 young women would arrive, claiming kinship. They were taken in. Illness followed. Death came quickly. Then the women vanished. Whitman called it the Trail of Whispers. From late 1949 through 1951, she traced the twins' movement through hidden networks of blood ties, connections never documented in official records. Family lines remembered only through oral history. Cousins of cousins. Names passed down but never written. The first confirmed sighting after the Jacksons occurred in February 1950. An elderly woman named Esther Williams lived alone outside Poplar Bluff, Missouri. She told her neighbor the twins were great-nieces who had come to care for her. Within weeks, her health declined sharply. Once strong and independent, she became frail, confused, fearful. Her neighbor later recalled the unease she felt. "Those girls moved like they was tied together. And their eyes, Lord, those eyes looked wrong. Like something wild wearing people's faces." Esther Williams died 3 weeks later. The twins disappeared the night after her funeral. 2 months later, they appeared again, this time at a small black church community near Mountain Home, Arkansas. They arrived as orphans, distant cousins, survivors of tragedy. The congregation welcomed them. Reverend Samuel Green and his wife offered them shelter. Within a month, both of the Green children fell ill with a sudden, violent fever. They died days apart. The Reverend broke in the pulpit. During his final sermon, he claimed demons had entered his home wearing human skin. The following day, he and his wife were found dead, poisoned, hand in hand. The twins were gone. Community after community told the same story. No wounds. No violence. Just sickness. Confusion. Loss. What made their movements so unsettling wasn't just the deaths. It was the distance. The twins traveled between remote settlements separated by dense forest, rivers, and mountains, often faster than automobiles could manage in that era. No one ever saw them ride in a vehicle. No one recalled giving them money. Yet they always arrived on time. By early 1951, the rumors had outpaced the facts. Some claimed the twins could change shape at night. Others believed they could read minds. These stories grew wilder with each retelling, but they reflected genuine terror. Something was happening. And no one knew how to stop it. In March of 1951, the pattern shifted. The twins entered West Plains, Missouri, a larger town. Instead of family connections, they sought work. They were hired as night attendants at Pine Ridge Sanatorium, a tuberculosis facility. The hiring doctor, James Morrison, later testified that he couldn't remember deciding to employ them. Only that the refusal he intended never came. Within months, patient mortality rose sharply. No blame was assigned. Most patients were already dying. What ended their stay was not death, but a witness. A nurse named Clara Johnson encountered the twins during early rounds. She found them standing over a patient's bed, hands hovering inches above his chest, whispering together. When they noticed her, they turned. Johnson could not move. She described the sensation as being frozen, unable to blink, breathe, or scream, as something cold pressed into her thoughts. By the time authorities were notified, the twins were gone. They took patient files with them. And Dr. Morrison's private journals. The last time Abigail and Nora Caldwell were seen with certainty was in the fall of 1951. By then, fear had begun to outrun rumor. Doctors whispered to one another. Pastors warned their congregations in coded language. Entire families refused to open their doors to strangers, even those claiming blood ties. But one man had been waiting for them. Dr. Richard Evans practiced medicine in Salem, Missouri. He was known throughout the region for his research into inherited disorders, particularly those affecting isolated communities. Years earlier, he had exchanged letters with Dr. William Harrington, letters that ended abruptly with Harrington's disappearance. So when two identical young women walked into Evans' office one September afternoon, he recognized them instantly. Tall. Pale. Amber-eyed. He did not ask their names. He already knew. Evans kept his composure. He offered seats. He made polite conversation. But beneath the calm, his hands trembled. As he spoke, he quietly instructed his nurse to contact local law enforcement. The twins watched him with unnerving stillness. They spoke only once. Together. We know what we are. We have always known. According to the nurse's later statement, the air in the room began to darken, not as though the lights had gone out, but as if the light itself was being swallowed. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. Sound dampened, thick and muffled. When the darkness receded moments later, Evans lay unconscious on the floor. The twins were gone. Evans survived, but something inside him did not. He never returned to medical practice. He refused interviews. He spoke of the incident only once, telling a colleague that there were limits to what human knowledge should pursue. He lived the rest of his life as a recluse. When Evans died in 1972, his belongings were catalogued. Among them was a sealed envelope addressed simply, "To whoever comes looking." Inside was a single page. Some bloodlines are too damaged to continue. Some knowledge is too dangerous to chase. I have seen what humanity becomes when genetics are pushed past their breaking point. God help us all. After Salem, the twins vanished again. No confirmed sightings followed. No arrests. No bodies. No closure. For decades, the case lay dormant, half folklore, half forgotten history, until science caught up with the horror. In 1972, during renovations of the old Eminence Medical Clinic, workers uncovered a false wall. Inside was a cache of documents wrapped in oilcloth and sealed away from time. Dr. Harrington's private journals. They contained medical records spanning 3 generations of the Caldwell family. Diagrams. Family trees. Observations he never dared publish. Harrington had documented progressive genetic deterioration with chilling clarity. Mary's malformed foot. Joseph's extra fingers. Jeremiah's early blindness. Each defect traced back through intermarriage. But the twins' records were different. Harrington described identical abnormalities in both girls: fused fingers, unusual eye pigmentation, and something far more alarming. At the base of their skulls, both infants had exhibited a small protrusion. Harrington believed it indicated conjoined neural tissue, a partial cranial connection. He wrote, "The implications of sibling reproduction compounded by generations of cousin marriage are catastrophic. Recessive traits, both physical and neurological, may express in unpredictable and extreme forms." Modern geneticists reviewing Harrington's notes in the early 2000s proposed a rare condition, cranial parasitic twinning, primarily neural rather than skeletal. In simple terms, 2 minds, partially connected. A shared consciousness. Dr. Michael Chun of Johns Hopkins University suggested this could explain the twin synchronization, private language, and apparent mental coordination. What makes this case unique is not the physical connection, but the neurological one. A shared cognitive bridge may have existed. Psychiatric historians took the analysis further. Dr. Eliza Montgomery argued that the twins' lack of empathy and predatory behavior could result from shared consciousness combined with extreme isolation. They may have developed a moral framework entirely separate from society, one in which others were not perceived as individuals. And yet, the most disturbing accounts remained the hardest to explain. Witness after witness described mental paralysis. Compulsion. Obedience. Montgomery offered a chilling theory: 2 identical individuals acting in perfect synchronicity could exert overwhelming psychological influence, appearing supernatural while remaining biologically human. By the mid-1970s, the Caldwell twins should have aged into middle life. But something didn't add up. In 1976, a call reached Sheriff Robert Miller of Dent County. Hikers had found an abandoned cabin deep in the woods near Salem. Inside, Miller discovered something that would haunt him forever. The walls were covered in photographs, newspaper clippings, maps, all connected by red string. At the center, 2 faded images. Abigail. Nora. Pinned movements traced across decades. Deaths logged. Communities marked. A leather-bound journal lay open. Its final entry read, "They know I'm watching. They haven't aged. God forgive me for helping create them." The Caldwell bloodline should have ended long ago. 1 month earlier, Dr. Richard Evans had vanished. Even decades after the Salem discovery, the story of Abigail and Nora Caldwell refused to die. In 1998, genetic researcher Dr. Samantha Reynolds began studying isolated communities throughout the Ozarks. Her focus was supposed to be benign, tracing unique DNA markers among mixed-race populations. But as she compared samples, a pattern emerged that sent a chill down her spine. Roughly 5% of unrelated families shared a distinct genetic signature. Not a common variant, but one unusually concentrated, appearing in scattered communities across Missouri, Arkansas, and northern Kentucky. Dr. Reynolds wrote in her paper, Genetic Echoes. The presence of this marker in multiple, historically isolated communities suggests a common source moving unseen between otherwise separate gene pools. In other words, the Caldwell twins, if they survived, may have integrated their DNA into families across the region. Some researchers proposed a more conventional theory: children born to the twins and abandoned in these communities had been quietly absorbed by local families. But whispers persisted of something darker. Paranormal theorists suggested the twins had learned to manipulate reproduction itself, leaving genetic traces like a slow-acting contagion, a living inheritance that outlived them. Evidence surfaced in 2012, almost as if to confirm the worst suspicions. Workers excavating a dam project near the original Caldwell property uncovered a series of small caves hidden among the hills. Carbon dating indicated use from the 1940s into the early 1970s. Inside, forensic anthropologists found arrangements of bones, both human and animal, in precise geometric patterns. Dozens of small mummified bundles initially thought to be ritual offerings, later identified as human fetuses. Genetic anomalies consistent with extreme inbreeding. Dr. Julia Martinez, who led the forensic analysis, summarized: "Whatever occurred here combines rudimentary ritual with advanced genetic understanding. The perpetrators possessed knowledge that should have been decades ahead of the era." Federal authorities swiftly intervened. By 2013, the caves were sealed, much of the evidence classified. Investigators were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. Official statements referred vaguely to a local cult operating mid-century, omitting any connection to the Caldwell twins. For decades, the story remained buried. Until 2020. Margaret Wilson, a retired nurse, made a deathbed confession. She had worked at a small clinic in the Arkansas Ozarks during the 1960s, often alone at night. Between 1964 and 1968, she claimed, the Caldwell twins had visited repeatedly. Always together. Always requesting precise medications and supplies, apparently unrelated to any known medical conditions. Wilson described them as unnerving, yet never threatening. They didn't have to. Those eyes, they could hold you in place like some physical force. The twins allegedly spoke in perfect unison, sharing plans that chilled Wilson to her core. They called it their great work. Creating a new bloodline. Spreading their legacy. Even when these bodies fail, it will continue. Wilson's most startling account occurred in November 1968. The twins told her she would no longer be needed, their method was perfected. Our blood now walks through many. Even when these bodies fail, we will continue. The hills remember, nurse. The hills will always remember. Wilson's testimony could not be independently verified. Skeptics cited her age and cognitive decline. But her descriptions of their appearance, synchronized movements, and hypnotic amber eyes matched decades of earlier records, details unlikely to be fabricated. The legacy. Today, the Caldwell twins occupy a space between history and legend. Their story remains a cautionary tale. Scientific curiosity meets horror, extreme isolation and repeated consanguinity produce profound genetic and neurological consequences. Folklore meets reality, communities remember, passing stories of amber-eyed strangers and whispered warnings to new generations. Ethics meet obsession, attempts to track or confront the twins often ended in disappearance, injury, or death. Modern public health initiatives in rural areas now include education on genetic counseling and risks of consanguinity, but the lessons remain incomplete, underfunded, and scattered. The twins are more than a historical case study. They are a living fear, a myth rooted in scientific fact. Somewhere in the hollows and forests, some whisper, they may still move unseen. Watching. Waiting. Spreading their blood quietly, invisibly, into unsuspecting families. An elderly resident of Shannon County once told a folklorist in 2015. Some say they're still out there, devil twins. Others say they died long ago. The truth is worse. Their blood is in these hills. Mixed into families unaware. When cousins marry cousins to keep property in the family, sometimes those old genes wake up. You'll see it in a child born with strange eyes. Or twins that speak in whispers. The Caldwells ain't gone. They're just waiting, in the blood. The hills remember. The woods remember. And so does history.